But right now, we have the pleasure of having on from Sporting Kansas City head coach Peter Vermes. Coach, welcome and thanks so much for making time.
Yeah, Anthony, my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And, Coach, let's get right to it. A season last year that I think a lot of Sporting Kansas City fans would say, well, it's done and over with. Let's look forward as you are with your staff. A lot of additions in the offseason. But this is a veteran-laden team. I believe your team is stacked right now to win. Do you yourself believe you guys have everything that it takes right now to get to that final and break the door down and win it?
Well, I think we've reloaded here in the off season on top of, I think, making good choices with the guys that we've kept around. And I think we are positioned well. But again, look, everything is on paper, and preseason is a long, grueling couple, like 5 weeks, if you will. And so for us right now, I think the hard work has begun. We still have a lot of work to do. And I do believe in the group, though. I think the environment, the culture, all that is very good. But most importantly, I think that they're very committed.
Let's talk about the environment, the culture you mentioned. Last week, we saw the big trade going down with Chicago Fire, Dax McCarty going there to change the environment, change the culture. We had on head coach Veljko Paunovic, and he told us about they needed that change, that culture change. You have that. You've got leaders in that locker room. Graham Zusi, Matt Beasler, Benny Feilhaber, guys that know what to say at the right time where maybe yourself as the head coach doesn't have to say anything. How important is that and makes your job much easier to have these guys in there?
Look, culture is an interesting thing. It's created by the leader. It's the leader's job to then sell it and get the players to buy into it. But at the end of the day, it's the players who have to be accountable to each other with it. And that is when you don't have leadership inside your locker room, when you don't have players that feel comfortable in making sure that they not only hold the youngest guy on the team accountable, but they're equals, if you will. It's very difficult to win in this business. So the fact that we do have those types of players in our team makes it easy over the course of a year. But most importantly, they have to be ones to obviously bring it themselves, but then obviously again hold each other accountable to it.
Coach, how important is it to have that open door policy, that open communication with your players, especially in 2017? We know a lot of the younger players want that face-to-face communication. Maybe a player isn't playing as he should be, and maybe he's not starting in 2 or 3 games. How important is it that you lay it all out there, face-to-face, man-to-man, and say, look, I'm not happy about the last couple games. I'm going to ask you to sit down, have a seat. Or we know that some coaches just don't say anything. They fill out the lineup, and they won't say nothing to the player why they're not playing. How do you go about it?
It's a really interesting question. I think one of the things that has become very important to the way that I work within my team is actually very simple. I think as a coach, you have to continue to grow with the time and also the generation of people that you are working with. If you don't, I think it's time for you to get out of the game. So for me, I understand the group of people that I'm working with. I've spent a lot of time in the off season actually studying millennials, and I think the biggest thing is that they do want face time. They want the opportunity to understand where they are, where they're going, and what's going to be the plan to help them get there. And so being the leader of the club, being the leader of the team, that goes with the territory, goes with the job. And so communication is extremely important to me. And it's not just with the players, but it's with the staff as well. When everybody understands what it is that you want, number one. Number two is what are the resources to help them get their job done. And then finally, they know that you have their back when the times are tough. I think that's how you build an environment of people that want to pursue excellence every day.
Coach, up here in Toronto, we're lucky to have an unbelievable derby with the Montreal Impact, TFC in Montreal in the playoffs during the regular season. It's a European atmosphere. It's unbelievable. But I don't think people realize that Western Conference is deadly. Week in and week out, there's no gimme. And I look at whether it's San Jose, Houston, and I look at FC Dallas. We're talking to Fernando, LA, on and on. I mean, Portland. You got to shake your head and say to yourself, wow, I mean, every week we have to be as best as we can. We're going to lose points. We're going to leave points on the table, and we might not be able to pick them up and get into that playoffs. How do you get that mindset ready in your coaching staff and in your players that they realize, hey, guys, we got to get going right from the get-go?
Well, it starts in the offseason, preparing your team, making sure that they understand what lies ahead, number one, and that's why it's important for the off-season training program for the players, that when they come into preseason, they're not just surviving, they're actually able to stay focused on understanding what your model of play is, and that type of intensity of training starts from day one, because you can't just go in the preseason, you can't just have a nice ho-hum time and expect all of a sudden when the season begins that you're now going to step up the intensity just because it's game time. You have to train that way. You have to get yourself ready for that and to be able to play at that level, and that means that every day you have to train that way. And I think our guys, if there's one thing I have to say, is that the players that have been here over the last so many years, they have been very committed to a couple different things, and one of them is work ethic. And I think that's an important aspect that you need in every game that you play in MLS. It's not just in the West Coast, although I will tell you the West Coast is absolutely very competitive, but every game in MLS is a dogfight, and you're very right. You have to be willing to sacrifice everything week in, week out to try to get those 3 points.
Coach, the NCAA, in my opinion, has done an outstanding job in the last 5 to 10 years in developing, producing players to be sent on to have great MLS careers. A friend of mine, Sashil Sarowski, a University of Maryland head coach, has done a tremendous job. Some of his players on your squad, but they're scattered all over. I think that the NCAA is not getting the respect, in my opinion, they deserve, or the help for what they're doing in sending quality players to different MLS clubs. How do we go about changing that? How do we go about putting the spotlight and saying, hey, this is, the success that we're having here in MLS. It's credit to some of these wonderful universities and colleges.
Well, look, I think there's a lot of people that think they do a great job, and I also think a lot of people understand that they have a very difficult job, especially in 2007 with the advent of the academies for all the MLS teams. It really changed the landscape, the recruiting landscape for all of those top-end college programs. And so what they've had to do is they've had to go out and they've had to search and find what a lot of people would probably deem to be second-tier players and turn them into first-tier players. And I think, if anything, what it's done is it's given the opportunity for a lot of players to get an opportunity that they probably never would have before based on the academies. And so if the academies weren't there, those players probably wouldn't be playing for those clubs. But it's given an opportunity for us to increase the player pool, which I think ultimately is better for the game and makes us a much stronger and deeper country when it comes to producing and developing talent.
Coach, I followed MLS since day one, and no longer could it be considered, as they said years and years ago, the retirement league. I believe the league has taken off in leaps and bounds in the last 3 or 4 years. We see it's exploding with new franchises coming in, Atlanta, Minnesota, on, and players are starting to come here, as we saw, Kaká, Jovinko, on and on. We're attracting players. What do you believe is so key and so important for MLS to continue to climb that ladder of respectability worldwide so that players want to come here, coaches, on, and this league continues to thrive?
Well, I think you kind of started off with your statement that we're not viewed as a retirement league anymore. I think, look, over the years, those were the players that we could only get based on the financial constraints that we had within our salary cap and not some of the other player mechanisms. But what is changing is that I think MLS is doing a very good job with this. They have really sat back and have been evaluating the salary cap and have been looking at different ways, obviously, to bring in not just DPs, but players 4, 5, and 6, and 7 on your roster and be able to invest money there. And it's not for guys that are making, $3, $5, $7 million a year. It's guys that are in the range of, somewhere between $5 and $1 million a year, which I think there is some incredible talent around the world, and also even in our country, that fit into that level of play. And that's why you see many players that are Americans that have been overseas are coming back to the United States, which I think is incredibly, incredibly important. And that's going to continue to build our league as we move forward. And again, I give a lot of credit to the league, but also the teams, because I think they understand that we're building teams for the long term.
Coach, just a couple other things, and then we'll let you go. We really appreciate your time. I want to get your thoughts on, obviously, USA in a month-long training camp. They're getting ready for some big World Cup qualifying games coming up as well. A bit of a rough start there in the Hex, but I think they'll get it all straightened out under Bruce Arena. I said this going back to 2 World Cups ago. I truly believe that the USA will be knocking on the door of a Final Four of a World Cup. Whether it's Russia, whether it's Qatar, I believe they finally will get to a Final Four. And I think that we underestimate here in Canada, looking down on what has taken place in the USA since MLS has come into existence. Players being able to play, coaches being able to coach, a structure, on and on and on. I believe this is key. How important is it, do you believe, that everyone buys in the US of A? Clubs, academies, everyone is on board on the same page, so that you can see finally maybe the US of A getting to a Final Four in a World Cup?
Well, I think you're already seeing it. I think there's a great relationship between the U.S. Soccer Federation and Major League Soccer, and also Major League Soccer and USL and United States Soccer Federation and the NASL. And so I think when you see that, and then you have all the academies, and with the U.S. Soccer Federation instituting the Development Academy League for all the Development Academy organizations, all of this has been in pursuit of continuing to develop talent. And here recently, they've made a big push on the coaching educational side, which I think is probably the area in which, as a country, it's probably the area that we are deficient the most, and that is coaching from the ground up. I definitely think we're getting much, much better from in that area, and I think it has a lot to do with the initiatives that are coming out from U.S. Soccer and Major League Soccer at the moment. And as we continue to forge ahead, I think you already see a lot of that continuity between all of the programs from the bottom to the top, from the top down to the bottom. And I think that's going to continue to raise the level of soccer in our country and produce the players that are going to do exactly what you said. I think continue to give us success on the national stage.
Coach, lastly, up here in Toronto and in Canada, I've worked in the game a number of years, and as a parent of 2 boys, I want to get your thoughts. I want you to talk to the young coaches out there. 2 of my sons that have gone through the system, I still feel that there's so much more the coaches need to learn, and you mentioned coach education, and they need to do that on a regular basis, because I still feel too many coaches are out there, youth coaches, to win that $2 medal, that $2 trophy, and really do it for self-gratification and not looking at the big picture and development. I want you to talk to these young coaches out there, Coach, because you're successful. You've won. You understand what it means as a player, as a coach now. And I think a lot of times these youth coaches really are doing a lot of damage to a lot of these youngsters by winning at all costs and forget everything else.
Well, look, it's a simple thing, really. When players are coming through the system at a young age, the objective is that you are trying to develop the individual player, especially at the younger ages. When he hits somewhere around 16 is when you start to introduce more of a team concept, more tactics and things like that. But I think that's not new thinking. That's pretty normal in a lot of areas around the world. What I would say, in the place I think that we are really, really deficient in, and it's this, and that is, you talked about the educational side. I'm a big believer in the educational side, but I think it's not just going and taking a license in, how to coach, say, a 4-4-2 diamond. It's not just the components of soccer. For youth coaches, one of the most important things for me is them to understand the age group that they're coaching and they're teaching. Because when you're looking at a 14-year-old boy or compared to a 12-year-old boy, there's a big difference between them in their maturity level. How you should talk to them, what you should say, how you should teach them, how they learn. And those are the pieces that our coaches have to get better at and understand that there truly are building blocks, how these players develop and grow and progress as soccer players. And if you continue to coach our coaches in that way, in where they understand how they're supposed to talk to these kids and develop them, it's not just going to be about soccer, but it's going to be about the whole person. And at the end, that's what you're trying to develop. That's what you're trying to help create. And that's why these kids then find success over the long term, is because it's the whole person. It's not just they're a good soccer player. They also need to be able to survive outside the field. They need to be able to survive outside the locker room. And those are the important aspects that I think that we have to get better at in our countries to keep developing players and developing our game.
Coach, you're a class act, and you communicated that wonderful advice precisely and bang on. We can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Good luck in 2017, and hey, hopefully once the offseason happens next year, we'd love to have you up here in Canada to speak to some of these young coaches up here and to talk to them about the simple X's and O's and away from the field, all these things, because you're a guy that we would love to have up here to tap into you to understand all that you have learned throughout your travels in this game. Coach, thank you so much again, and good luck this season with your club.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.